this is for Speech 120, Dynamics of Communication, Project 1, which is going to be on the topic of privatizing public schools. So, my name's Tiffany Abraham. This is my husband, Larry Abraham. Say hi.
Hello.
So, alright, we're going to begin by, I'm going to debate with you kind of.
Okay.
So, is it safe to say that you are against any privatization of schools?
I wouldn't say I'm against any privatization. I think some private schools are good and necessary for people that want to have their kids go to a private school. But I think, that being said, I think we also need to have public schools in place
Right.
for people that don't want to send their kids to a private school or maybe can't afford it. So I think there's a role for each of those types of school.
I understand. So, if I understand you correctly, are you content with the education that you receive, that your children receive in public school?
I think for the most part, the education that they get is sufficient. I think there's always room for improvement, of course, and there's certain things that I'd like to see maybe done differently or better. But I think overall, from what I've seen from them being in pre-kindergarten and on and up, where my oldest is in 7th grade, I can see where they've obviously learned and they've progressed, and I think they're getting a good education.
That's good. They've been in the same school district from pre-K all the way up to 7th.
They have.
Cool. So my next question is that, since you have seen their education from pre-K all the way up to 7, well, one's in 7th and one's in 4th, do you think that all kids learn the same as far as, how they teach and how the educators go about teaching the kids?
I think there are some exceptions. Obviously, there's kids that maybe have a mental handicap, mentally challenged. They are going to need extra attention and special programs, so there should be something for them. But I think if you're to kind of separate them out from the rest of the children, I think for the most part, children learn the same. Obviously, there's some differences between the way boys learn and the way girls learn.
Yeah.
But I think a good teacher can overcome those differences and still get the material across to the kids. And especially if they know their students and they eventually figure out which students, some students learn better this way or hands-on versus just hearing it, or some learn better seeing it. So I think, they can tailor their teaching to their particular class.
I agree for the most part, and I would say, some teachers do that, but you're also going to have ones that don't. I personally had experiences, and I know you have also, where teachers go above and beyond to make sure that the kids do learn. Do you think that possibly with private schools or competitive schools in general, to completely do away with public schools and have private schools, that they would hold the teachers accountable for making sure that the kids do succeed as far as their grades?
Well, I think, and keep in mind, I went to a public school for a while and a private school, so I've been to both, and I can see the differences. In the private school I went to, it was a small school in a church. Didn't have a lot of money. The teachers didn't go to school to be a teacher. They weren't certified teachers. Not that they didn't do a good job, but I don't think they had the training and the education that the teachers have in the public schools.
Right.
And so I think, that's key, that if they get the right training and the right tools, they can be more successful. And of course, you're always going to have some teachers that overachieve, and then you're going to have some that underachieve. That's true in any field.
I understand. That is correct. I feel that way also. So with regards to privatizing public school, not necessarily doing away, maybe like a trial and error type with a certain district, like if our district where our kids go were to do away with public school and privatize schools, do you feel that there would be some type of competitiveness with that, that possibly they could do better in certain areas, or that, with schools of choice, I know they can go anywhere, but possibly with private school, maybe their education could be a little bit better?
I think if the public school or if the private schools had standards for teachers where they had to do certain training to get like a certificate to teach and had to have a certain education level, that would make me more comfortable with some of the private schools. And I do think that money could be better spent in some areas than it is now with the public schools. But again, I think the way the system works now, I think your average public school is probably better suited to teach than your average private school. You obviously have some big private schools that are well funded and have the funds needed to teach properly and get the good teachers.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at all the private schools out there, some of them are so small, a lot of them are so small, I don't know that the education there is very good.
I understand. That's proper evaluation, I would say. So, my next question is gonna be geared towards funding of public schools. So, as far as your property taxes, a majority of your property tax goes to funding public schools. So, if there were to be a complete elimination of that property tax, and you were able to take that money that you pay for public school in your property taxes and use it towards tuition to send your kids to a private school, how would you feel about that?
I mean, options are always good. I would rather have the option as opposed to paying property taxes and then having to pay out of pocket to send them to a private school. But then one thing you gotta take into consideration too, are what about those people that really don't pay property taxes if they rent? And now where are they gonna send their kids? They're not gonna probably have the money to send them to a private school that costs $300 a month because they really don't pay property taxes, so they're not gonna get that refund to use. And again, I mean, yeah, options would be nice, but if you take away the funding and you put it back to the people, then the public schools aren't funded, and you'll see a lot of districts crumble, and then I think you're gonna see kids get left out in certain areas.
You make a very valid point, and I actually didn't even think of that. There is especially inner city, a lot of people who rent and don't own. So that's a very good point. So, in conclusion, I feel like you actually swayed me a little bit.
You think public schools are important now?
Well, I've always thought they were important. I just feel like they're not, how do you say it? They're not as successful as they should be.
Well, I agree with that, don't get me wrong. I think if you look at test scores over the years and funding's gone up, test scores have gone down. In comparison to other countries, we've fallen. So I agree that maybe the amount of money we spend, we should be getting better results. But I think part of that problem is in the home. I think there's a lot of possibly broken homes, single parent homes. The kids aren't getting the help they need at home. A lot of these kids from teachers that I talk to, friends of mine, that they have a lot of behavioral issues in the classroom. They spend more time dealing with 5 or 6 kids that have behavior issues than teaching. 30 years ago, you didn't have that problem. So is it the teacher's fault? Is it the problem at home? Is it lack of funding? I mean, it's kind of hard to figure all that out.
I would say probably a combination, especially like we're seeing now with the teachers union and seniority and teachers who after 20 years of teaching, they teach differently than ones that are fresh out of college, newest different technologies that they're using, kids with iPads and all these different things that we'll say old school teachers don't agree with and fall short, which is understandable. So, but I would still say that I would rather have schools compete.
Competition's good. I think competition raises standards. It does in the business world. If you want Verizon or Sprint, well, whoever has the best service, even if you have to pay a little more, but it's better service, you may go with them.
Yeah.
So I think with teaching in schools, it's the same thing. You know, you may pay a little more, but if you want a better education for your kids, you're gonna go there. You know, but then these schools that aren't doing good, maybe they'll raise their level up so they can draw in more kids. So competition's always a good thing.
Well, and school of choice is actually based around that, which is a positive. How do you feel about school of choice?
I like it. I mean, I think you should. We live in America. I mean, it used to be a pretty free country. It's still somewhat free. I think we should be able to choose where we want to send our kids, and if, you know, obviously the biggest thing is transportation. If you don't live in that district, you have to get your kids to and from, but that's a choice you make, you know. So I think schools of choice is a great thing. It fosters competition, and I see it in the area where we live. School districts next door, you know, they're doing better in certain areas, and we know people that have sent their kids to a different district because of that reason. And I think the school district that we're in, I think they're starting to notice that, and maybe they're going to raise their level a little bit.
Yeah, becoming more competitive.
Because they don't want to lose students.
And we've talked about this, especially in the area of athletics. If you have two different schools, and one obviously has a really, really good academic curriculum, and then a really excellent athletic program, and then you have another school where they're falling short in academics and in sports, then you're obviously going to pick, like you said, as long as there is transportation or how you're going to get to that school of choice. But again, we've actually discussed this because we live in an area where this has happened.
Yes, that's what we do.
So, I would say we're both right. So this is going to conclude our discussion / debate, disagreement. Thank you,
Thank you.
husband,
Wife.
for having this conversation with me.
All right.
This is the end of Speech 120 Project 1.